Imagine this. You're a pilot on your 6th combat deployment. You're flying better than you ever have. You recover faster from G-loads. Your reaction time is razor sharp. Your fear response is different. There's a neural implant in your skull that whispers to your amygdala, turns the volume down on panic, turns the volume up on focus. Command loves your numbers. Your unit loves flying with you. Your family notices you don't laugh the same way anymore. Now imagine you're a medic. Your memory has been chemically sharpened. You can recall protocols, dosages, and trauma layouts with terrifying accuracy. You save more lives than anyone in your cohort. And you also remember every scream, every smell, every detail in 4K. There is no natural blur on the edges anymore. Nothing fades. And then imagine you're a LASO track operator. Your exosuit is paid for. Your procedures are optimized. Your training pipeline includes experimental tech that permanently changes your metabolism and stress response. Your contract ends, you take off the uniform, but you never really take off the enhancements. Who owns your body now? Who's responsible if something breaks in 10 years? At what point does becoming more capable start rewriting who you actually are? Tonight, in part 4 of the LASO Human series, we step into the layer that everything else sits on top of, or falls through. This is the ethical and identity stack. The biggest barriers, the unsolved research questions, what it means to stay human while we build warfighters and explorers for land, air, sea, and orbit. I'm Elle, and this is Endure Beyond. Welcome to the show. Enjoy.
Discovery Houston, recommend vector transfer to the BFS.
All right, good people and inhabitants of planet Earth, friends and allies, both foreign and domestic alike. Bienvenidos, yo costo, willkommen, achlan dik, bro, preservat, welcome to the #1 human efficiency podcast, the home of the elite, the safe space for human excellence and enhancement, where we expertly marry sports psychology and exercise physiology via evidence-based research to deliver not only value to you, but actionable intel so that you can better yourselves, your community, the nation, and furthermore, the species. This is Endure Beyond, and I'm your host, Darius Riddick, and I would like to extend my gratitude to you all for joining me here in what will turn out to be our most powerful, promising, and progressive episode to date. What an incredible time to be alive, right? What a fantastic opportunity we get to experience human existence in this year, in this era, and during this rapidly evolving infrastructure. Man, it's awesome. Whether you're a new arrival or an OG, I would like to say thank you. Thank you for enabling our mission to develop leaders on all levels, and most importantly, leaders who lead from the front. If you've been tracking this series, you know that we've been slowly building out over the past, I would say 50 episodes of what I call the LASO Human, the person who can operate across land, air, sea, and orbit at a level that actually matters. Why is this important to you? Say, for the sake of argument, you listening to this right now, you just found out this show in passing. Say that you're a researcher or you work at Walmart. Say that you're someone who may have everything together. They're at the peak of their prime. Or maybe you're someone who is trying to find their footing. You could be 15 or you can be 55. You could be Park Ave or on a park bench. The great thing about this, guys, is that what we do doesn't apply to just one discipline. It doesn't just apply to one domain. Hell, it doesn't even apply to one degree. It applies to human efficiency, the increase in time to benefit from point A to point B. When you establish a goal, which if you're here, I'm going to safely assume that you have one. Our role is not only to deliver duty to deliver value to you, but that value needs to be something that's going to help you. How are we going to increase your time? How are we going to give you more of that time back? How are you going to give you better tools to go out and build your own life? How are we going to give you information that's trusted through major databases or backed by research? That's very important to us. And this package that we're building through the LASO Human not only ensures that we do that, but it ensures that we get you on the same page with how things are going to evolve and how we see this coming to fruition. Nothing we've said here has been wrong yet, and we don't plan for it to be wrong because look, we're not exposing any secrets. We're not releasing any national assets. We're not doing anything that is not clear in plain sight. We're just doing the one thing that many of our predecessors were too afraid to do, and that is connect the dots. Connect the dots and forward project for transformational change. We're not afraid to get our hands dirty. We're not afraid to say, you know what, this is how we see this going. But most importantly, we need the people's investment. You know, the more we can do this together, the better chances we all have moving forward. And I think that we have talks of like, human tech integration in a spacefaring society and eradicating human disease and helping more underserved, undersourced, underrepresented communities actually get better, to actually be a part of change where most people in the past were afraid to go. We are boldly going faster and more efficient than ever. And that's what the LASO Human is really about. So if you have any desire for a better future, then welcome in. Welcome to something that truly applies to you. In part 1, we mapped the new battle space. In part 2, we built the physical stack. Part 2, exclusively for Endure Beyond Gold subscribers, which you can do via Apple Podcasts to get the exclusive episodes. It'll be the best $19 that you've ever spent, and you'll get access to the 1% doctrine, what the elite athletes, executives, entrepreneurs, and humans do day in and day out. Because it is a lifestyle, guys, and it is pay to play. And if you want to play and win, then why not be a part of a community that does? In part 3, same thing, available for Apple Gold subscribers. We laid out the cognitive and environmental tech layers. Tonight is part 4. And this is the one I respect and honestly fear the most. Because it's not just about how fast you can run, how high you can tolerate G's, how long you can stay awake, or how many systems you can control with your thoughts. It's about what all of that does to your soul, the true part about humankind, and why everything we do is focused on a human-centric model. This is your autonomy, your story, your dignity, your relationships. So when I say ethical and identity stack, here's what I mean in plain language. Ethics is how we decide what we should do with enhancement, not just what we can do. And identity is what stays constant when we start editing bodies, brains, and our connections to machines. And right now, around the world, you've got ethicists, lawyers, generals, neuroscientists, and philosophers arguing about this, trying to write rules for technologies that don't even fully exist yet. But we're going to do our best to connect them all. So here's how I want this episode to flow. First, we're going to walk through the 5 fault lines in human enhancement. As you know, we do our best to comb thousands of data points and compile them into not only actionable intel, but a usable model, something that you can understand whether you're in performance physiology or whether you're in engineering, whether you're in mathematics or you're in chemistry. How can we connect all of our disciplines together to move the needle on a mission? So, places where things can go very wrong or very right. Very wrong if we're sloppy, very right if we choose to do better than those that came before us. Second, we're going to zoom into identity, how it actually feels to be the human under the upgrade, or perceivably, right? Because none of us here are upgraded as far as I'm aware. And then third, we'll run through some of the big research questions that nobody really has clean answers for yet. And then we'll finish by building something you can control, your own ethical and identity stack, the spine inside your own personal LASO doctrine. Because you, yes, you listening to this, are exactly the kind of person that gets the first offers. The first experimental program, it's totally voluntary, but it would really help the team conversations. And I don't want you walking into that moment empty-handed. So L, let's lay out and navigate the minefield.
All right, so let's get honest. We can talk about LASO humans, super operators, orbital guardians all day, But if we don't walk through where this gets ugly, it's just sci-fi. You got a model for this. These fault lines you keep mentioning. What are they?
So traditionally, our role for this is to make this as seamless as possible. Um, Mostly because we realize how much of a monumentous task this is going to be, like we're doing something that's never been done before. So we're going to need more people, more groups, more cooperation in areas that we've never had before. We're braving essentially new waters, and we look at evidence-based research from major databases, but most importantly, how that translates to national capability in a spacefaring civilization. As an American society, we want to set the tone and set the pace in this new era. We want to be what it represents for innovation and progress into, the first time we could ever develop a spacefaring civilization. So when we approach in those two echelons and we say, hey, we want to make sure we do this right and include the citizens where our predecessors were afraid to before, we realize that there's ethical cracks. What's most important is that unlike our adversaries, that we actually approach and solve some of the problems in ethics when it comes to developing this stuff. And I feel as though our predecessors before us, just looking at the research, were so afraid to go into that realm that we actually did forward progress at the service. Whereas, our adversaries didn't care about that. So they didn't try to do it right. They just wanted to be first. And in this era, we're going to be first, but we're also going to do things right. But there's a lot of things that we have to do moving forward. And that's what this whole portion is for. So if we don't watch these ethical cracks, everything we're building on top of the LASO doctrine is going to fall apart. So let's start with the first one. Fault line number one is autonomy versus coercion. And on paper, enhancement is voluntary, right? You have neural implants, voluntary. You're not born with them. Performance enhancing drugs. You don't even have to take supplements or take any PEDs. Sometimes they're called voluntary. Experimental training protocols, also voluntary. But in practice, it gets messy fast. So let's look at the ethical practice, right? Imagine for a second, you're in a unit where the enhanced people by trade get promoted. They get better assignments, they get called serious, and the unenhanced get sidelined. How voluntary is that choice really? If you're in a command climate where a leader says it's your decision, but everybody knows saying no means letting your team down, is that free choice? This is an ethical fault line because consent under pressure is not the same as consent in a vacuum. And this doesn't just apply to the military. I mean, imagine a world, right, where pilots, surgeons, firefighters, even space workers feel like they have to take the latest cognitive enhancer or neural implant just to stay competitive. At that point, the question becomes, at what point does opportunity turn into coercion with extra paperwork? And again, this is something that's really important to highlight because the human centric portion will always exist. If it doesn't exist, then we don't need to have a conversation. But because we're talking about it, because we actually care about the future of humankind, not just replacing everybody with soulless robots, then it's important that we understand what the ethics of this progression is actually going to involve and what we want it to look like.
Have you ever felt that kind of pressure? Not necessarily with enhancement, but with voluntary stuff where you knew there was a hidden cost if you said no?
Yeah. So me personally, at plenty of times in service and out of it, where the message was, it's optional, but the real ones do it. We used to call that good old boy practice, and you really learn to decode that pretty quick. I think the kids might call that like gaslighting or something. And I want anyone who's listening in a leadership role to sit with this. If your people feel like their career, their belonging, or their honor depend on saying yes, you do not have a voluntary program. You have a soft, coercive pipeline with good PR. And that's the first fault line, autonomy. And if the people feel like they can't be autonomous, Everyone likes to work hard. Everybody likes to feel like they're in control. Everybody likes to feel like they're a part of something greater. But if you naturally remove that because of ego or because of your own personal bias, then you're basically driving the boat into the cliff. It's kind of like what we used to say in a few of the older episodes. Is like when I was young in my career, I didn't realize how great some of the missions of the units that I was with were, or how much, or what made America superior as a country as far as their national defense capabilities, as far as their intelligence and counterintelligence capabilities, and even a part of the mission that I was being on the bomb squad, being an intelligence officer, and even being a part of some of the humanitarian missions to see some of our partners then try and replicate our programs. And the reason why I was not able to see that is because at the top, these missions and these visions were established, but somewhere along the line above my head, some asshole decided, like, I'm going to do what I want to do, and ended up completely derailing what could have been something incredible. And that's what we're trying to get rid of, to clean up, and we're trying to establish something that's coherent on all levels. And that's really important because our adversaries don't have that same sort of introspection, right? They just go do whatever they want, whether it's ethical or not. So we're not only leading the charge, but we're doing it in an ethical way that ensures that we get there first and that we're able to stay there the longest. So, with that being said, let's hit fault line number 2, which is safety versus performance arms race. Now, enhancement at its core is about stretching performance. Okay, that's what this whole thing is about. LASO in general, for those of you that may not have had access to the previous episodes, which I highly suggest you go listen to part 2 and part 3 to get a grip on what it is that we've been talking about. It is our duty, not only as American citizens, okay, because I know that we have international partners, as humans experiencing existence in this era, and seeing and being a part of this rapidly changing infrastructure towards a spacefaring society, to interrogate all the data points that have provided us a way forward. What has worked, what needs to be removed, what needs to be improved, and what needs to be completely thrown out. That's the whole basis of efficiency. And then enhancement means uh, 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 getting better on top of those models. So, more endurance, more focus, more strength, more adaptability, more resilience to space in adverse environments. But a lot of the tools on the table, certain drugs, implants, gene tweaks, aggressive stress protocols, we don't have 30-year data on those. We have short studies, small cohorts, animal models, and projections. Potentially because I believe out of fear. People were afraid of transformational change. The temptation, especially in war and high stakes missions, is to say, the risk is worth it. The mission matters more. We'll deal with the side effects later. But there's a hard question hiding in there. The hard question is, who is we? Now, where I believe our predecessors again did us a disservice is because they said this, like, we don't need to figure it out now because, we will figure it out later. Most of those people are either dead or gone. So it's not their problem anymore. In fact, it's our problem now. They couldn't have predicted what the current climate or infrastructure was going to look like. So we then have to take it upon ourselves to be like, well, where can we do better where they were afraid to go? Because when your tour is over, or when your contract ends, when you leave the agency or the unit, that institution gets to say, oh, thank you for your service, but you're the one who lives with whatever that enhancement did to your sleep, your mood, your heart, your fertility, your aging. And that's going to be on my generation. So the fault line is how much unknown risk is acceptable, and who actually bears it. And on top of that, since we understand who's essentially going to bear it, we have to get better and better and better and do our absolute best at answering that honestly.
Okay, so we've got autonomy and safety. What's number 3?
Oh, yeah. So number 3 is the fairness, inequality, and access. And I'm well aware, trust me, this is one of the things that definitely keeps me up at night as far as this whole mission goes. Um, because it's not just ethics, it's economics. If enhancement works, if we can prove certain implants, protocols, or even biotech stacks truly make humans more capable. And not only that, but have it on an ethical model that is serviceable and repeatable, there's a real danger that they become capability multipliers for people who are already ahead. And I just want to say that, you know, that is the nature of the game. It's why we say it's pay to play. For example, if you can't afford $19 per month for Endure Beyond Gold, you're only getting access to half of this model. So you're essentially getting 50%, while someone else who's like, you know what, I want to invest in myself. I want to invest in the show. I like what the show is about. They're going to pay the $20, and then they're going to get access to the complete model, which gives them twice as much information, which translates to twice as much capability, twice as much potential return on investment than someone who only decides to do 50%. So it's really important to understand that, what you put in is what you get out. Uh, but rich nations, elite units, private security forces, billionaires, black budget programs, it's all par for the course. And meanwhile, the average citizen or worker or even soldier is going to be told, hey, thanks for keeping up with the bare bones. Here's a patch and a t-shirt type deal. But, that is always going to be part of a hyper competitive landscape. Some humans are not just better trained, but structurally upgraded, and others are permanently behind. Now, there is a flip side. Used well, enhancement could actually reduce inequality. And this is what actually allows me to get some sleep. This is what's exciting, like enhancing people with disabilities, mitigating the effects of poverty, or even giving frontline workers better protection. So the fault line isn't enhancement is bad. It's, do we design this as a narrow privilege or as a protective baseline for those who carry the weight, or both? And that's a policy, culture, and values question as much as a tech question, because just because we field something doesn't mean that someone's guaranteed to use it. If we say some of these models, let's take the whole exoskeleton race, for example. If we invest in companies that can commercialize the technology, just because it's affordable doesn't mean that someone's then going to take the opportunity to use it. So again, I think what it boils down to is you get out what you are willing to put in.
And then there's the big one you talk about a lot in private, dignity. Not just do I feel like myself, but do I feel like I'm being treated as a person or a piece of gear?
Fault line number 4 is authenticity and who am I? Now are in the identity stack, and there's a difference between drinking coffee and having a chip in your head that adjusts neurotransmitters in real time. There's a difference between getting a good night's sleep and taking a compound that edits how you form memories or how much fear you feel in a given situation. Like, we have to realize how much of a dynamic investment that we're making in human capability. And at some point you have to ask, is this helping me become more myself, or is it installing a version of me that someone else wants? Okay, if you blunt fear enough times, are you still courageous, or are you just chemically numb? If you tamper with rage, do you lose your righteous anger alongside your destructive anger? If you enhance memory to the point where nothing fades, what does that do to grief, forgiveness, and even healing? This fault line is primarily about authenticity. It's about why our primary role was to say, all right, well, we have to educate on the importance of, say, emotional regulation. Why is it so important for a soldier, for an athlete, for an executive, for a person to understand themselves first, to be able to self-govern, to be able to establish a principle foundation of, like, hey, I know how I respond on days that I'm tired, sad, angry, lonely, happy, joy, experiencing the spectrum of emotions. And then, you're able to have a more rapid response on a greater scale in the areas that are actually warranted. Versus without that, you don't have any discrimination between, let's say, ethical rage or righteous rage. And that's why your sense of self is built on your traits, your experiences, and of course your interpretive lens, which is why we believe that if we're able to commercialize this and we focus in the right direction, where most sci-fi programs get it wrong, where they focus primarily on kids, we're able to have a level of discernment in adults where they do have an interpretive lens that's more controllable or more focusable. Like it's like if you spent 6 years filling up a dam versus if you spent 16 years filling up a dam, naturally the 16 years is going to have more water in it. So that means where that flow of water goes is going to be a lot more powerful because there's more. And if you can essentially control that flow, then you're going to have a more powerful effect. So when you start sliding in tools that rewrite those, even for good reasons, you have to ask what are the potential points of destabilization for the whole structure. And of course, some people will be fine, and others might wake up one day and feel like a stranger in their own skin. But I have to beg the question, even if we identify that openly, what's different than right now? You have people that wake up that experience the normalcy of everyday life and still feel like strangers in their own skin. So it's really important that even with that, we do this right. So not only when we innovate with this program, that we do it right, but we could also help people that opt out of the program to still have a sense of autonomy, of ethical personal control, and to live a better life. So last but not least, fault line number 5, human dignity versus instrumentalization. And I know some people out there are like, what? Instrumentalization is just a fancy word for being used. And, this is a very conflicting topic to understand for me. So I would understand some confusion. My father used to say, if you're not useful, then what are you existing for? And, and he's old school Jamaican. So his roots were a little bit different. Sometimes you've probably heard it as, if you can't be used, then you're not useful. But I'd like to present a different kind of connotation on that. Okay, the sometimes the more you can upgrade humans, the more temptation there is to treat them like big, walking, expensive tools. What we're doing is improving durability. We're improving human capability. We're not replacing anything. Hence why most of the things that we do, if not all of them, are centered around human capability and human durability. And it has to be repeatable models. I think that's what's most important. So where our adversaries and where some of our predecessors have incorrectly approached, they'll say like, hey, the state paid for your enhancements. You owe it more risk, or you're more resilient now, so we can push you harder. You signed up for this, so don't complain about the side effects. Our early military days saw the effects of that. As we send these young men and women to war, we expect them to be robotic or to remove the human element from it. And what happens is they return shells. They're unable to reintegrate. They're unable to connect with their families, and they're unable to still be useful assets to the nation and to the entire species. And, one of my priorities with the LASO doctrine is foregoing that in a way where people can still be a part of innovation and progress, and they still can have a sense of normalcy post this whole thing. When we start talking about LASO humans, operators who can be dropped into any environment, who can function in orbit, who have AI co-pilots and upgraded bodies, there's a very real risk that institutions start thinking, that's not a person, that's a platform. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And the scary thing is that even some people in the program will probably start thinking about that themselves. Maybe they'll internalize it. But this is where we have to draw a hard line and say, a human being, enhanced or not, is not a disposable asset, right? We say platform so that we understand that there are levels to it and how to correctly build it. but they are not equipment. They do not become less deserving of protection because we made them more capable. And if our partners, it, if a society, if a nation can't hold that line, then it doesn't deserve LASO humans. Because I guarantee you, for us and the work that we do in this, and who we partner with in our projections, for even national capability, it's not a matter of if we accomplish this; it's a matter of when we accomplish it.
So let's recap that minefield so everyone's tracking. 1. Autonomy versus coercion. 2. Safety versus performance arms race. 3. Fairness and inequality. 4. Authenticity and sense of self. 5. Human dignity versus being treated like equipment. That's a lot of weight to carry before we even go into orbit. Where do you want to go next?
So really the point of this is to clear a lot of the air, all right? Because, this whole confusion and ego and policy and all this stuff really needs to be cut out as we're trying to make this thing as efficient as possible. And that's where my role really comes in, to see things in the most streamlined way possible. Now, when people talk about human enhancement, they love to argue about things like principles and policy. And I believe that that's necessary, right? Everyone has a voice, and the more input we can get that say has a lot of overlaps, the better. But I want you to picture the inner life of a LASO truck human, not just the brochure or propaganda, the real inside. And as we've evaluated the fault lines, there are 3 pressure points that I think about. And the first identity pressure point is memory and narrative. Now, where you are today, if you really stop and think about it, your identity is tightly tied to your memory. And most importantly, how you build a narrative from it. One of the most important parts about hyper learning, the doctrine that we described as a leg of apex brain, like how do you learn faster, but not just learn faster, but to be able to retain the information and then recall at a rapid rate. One of the most important parts of that was this understanding of blame. How do you identify a situation that may have happened through a memory or through an experience, and look at that in a way that's neutral, in the sense of how can I learn from this without saying it's my fault or their fault, but what can I do to learn from this experience? And we found that the highest performing humans, those who were the most productive, who were the most successful, who were at the top of their game, had the uncanny ability to approach these experiences with a sense of neutrality, so that it was almost guaranteed that they learned something from it. And then that became like a strong muscle, and they were able to flex it, where an average person would see it as a negative situation. They were able to say, you know what, this is neither good nor bad. It's an experience. So my role right now is to learn from it and then be able to apply this at a later scenario. Now, run a thought experiment with me, okay? You go through multiple high trauma deployments, okay? Someone offers you a protocol, a drug, stimulation, whatever, that blunts the emotional intensity of those memories so you can keep functioning, keep going back. On paper, okay, that's a gift. But in practice, you're editing your story. You might still remember the facts, but the emotional weight, the horror, the guilt, the grief, that all gets turned down. Now, do you become more functional? Probably. Now, do you become more yourself or less? And what happens when the protocol stops? Do those feelings come roaring back? Do you feel like you've lived those years, or like they were skipped in your life? And that's not a question that any algorithm can answer for you. So I think it's really important that our approach is not to remove any of the human element. It's to better understand it, to rapidly disseminate what is best to use to their advantage and what is not, which is why I believe that in essence, there's more people that can help with this. There's more people that can make this mission, this LASO doctrine, even possible. Or let's just excuse the LASO thing for a second, like to improve human capability at a greater scale than some of our predecessors have, right? Say for astronauts, for example, where they choose 10 out of a class of 10,000 every 2 years. It's like, you're telling me out of all the amazing people on Earth, there's only 10 that have met the metrics, I refuse to believe that. I feel like somebody's not doing their freaking job. Like, imagine if we had that sort of recruiting amount in our military corps. Like, we wouldn't be the number one country. It just wouldn't be possible. So with that sort of approach, we have to say, hey, what if, right? What if there's a better way to approach this where we can not only have a higher quantity, but also better quality that still retains the human element? Identity pressure point number 2, agency with an AI co-pilot. We've talked about this quite a few times before, but the human tech interface integration is upon us, ladies and gentlemen. There's no secret to that. AI and neural interfaces for the human context is happening more rapidly than ever. That's why it's so important that we talk about what that relationship actually looks like. Now, in a LASO context, imagine a suit and an AI that are constantly feeding your best courses of action, route suggestions, target priorities, risk assessments, micro adjustments to your movement. You're still in charge, but in practice, you're taking AI's advice 80 to 90% of the time because it's faster and usually right. Whereas you're able to observe in like a 180 lens, or even let's be generous, okay, let's say a 270 lens. The AI co-pilot is able to see 360, 720, 900 in all directions. And it's like, okay, well, you maintain what's best for human discretion and application. And I'm telling you, this is all the data, 4 times as much I could gather in an instance. So now let's decide together. So, when a mission goes well, the credit is still there. And over time, you become the biological front end for a complex system, but that's what works. Okay. It's like if you have a super upgraded vehicle, you're still driving it, you're still telling it where to go, but it's then able to knock out all the stuff that you don't even really need to worry about. And then you become more than just just a soldier. You then develop into like an explorer, an upgraded human, an entirely more capable interface. And of course, some people will be fine with that, and others will quietly fall apart under it. But the point is, guys, it's happening whether you like it or not. So it's better to be ahead of the curve than to be suffocated by it. So for the last identity pressure point, number 3, body as a platform. Right now, most of us think of the body as mine, which you should. Your body, your choice. Even if culture and industry, our adversaries, try to hijack that. Now, under a heavy enhancement paradigm, we have to realize that the body becomes part you, part medical project, and part state or corporate investment. Now, you may have hardware that requires regular updates, check-ins, proprietary tools. You may sign contracts about what you can and can't do with your body. You may owe someone debts directly tied to the upgrades inside of you, but you have to realize that that's just a translation from the external system now. And the reason why we refer to it as the human platform is because it's pretty obvious, man. It's like there's so many layers to it that, a single person can't account for every single one. So we have to remove everything that doesn't matter, enhance what does, and then help you understand how you can then self-govern that same sort of approach. And if no one equips you with the psychological tools and spiritual tools to navigate that, like we have done so very well in the past 500 plus episodes of Endure Beyond, you will eventually feel like your life is not your own, which, I think for us in our mission, especially for the American Human Enhancement Program, we won't even have to worry about that because we're going to do such a good job on this, and we're going to identify and have so many problems solved on massive levels that not only are people going to enjoy it, but we're going to be first, we're going to be ethical, and we're going to be the winners come long term. Because again, as we see this rapid transition, what's most important is maintaining truth and preservation in a human-centric model. The people come first, progress and innovation come next.
So that's the backdrop. Fault lines, inner life, unsolved questions. Let's bring this down to the level of the person on their commute right now. The operator, the scientist, the med student, the parent, the young kid who feels this pull toward being more. What do they actually do with this?
So where I imagine we'll get a lot of pushback on this is actually not on the institutional level. It's actually on the citizen investor level, which is why I'm doing my best here to explain to you guys. I was once like you. Okay. I started not knowing about any of this, and I fell into my passion being in special operations in the Air Force and just understanding, what it's like to be on the other side. So I'll tell you honestly, when I say this is happening, whether you like it or not, and that's not just like an American way. Our adversaries are trying to do it as well. They are actually in the midst of doing it. But where we're doing better than them is they're doing it without remorse. They're not thinking about it ethically. They're not thinking about the right ways to do it. They're not asking for permission. We're asking to join forces, to shake hands, to do this thing right. We have to ensure that we're including the people as well, because we can't have a progressive society without the people's investment. So refusing to outsource your story is only going to make this process more difficult. You are going to be able to keep track of who you are deliberately while you're being trained, upgraded, and deployed. And it's the same foundations of what we're observing now. Journaling, not Instagram captions, real private journals, after action reflections that include how you felt, not just what you did, and regular conversations with people who you knew before you were enhanced, family, old friends, mentors, chaplains, therapists, and you build rituals that remind you, I am more than my gear. I am more than my performance metrics. I am more than this unit or this agency. Because if you don't, right, if the people that we involve in this program don't, the mission and the machinery will happily supply you with an identity that is extremely effective but extremely shallow. And shallow identities crack under cosmic loads. The research has told us that. History has shown us that. And again, that's a big mistake our predecessors has made by completely trying to wipe that out. So when you wipe out the human element, you wipe out the most important part of what makes us human. You wipe out the emotion and the discretion, which where with limited information may seem like the right thing to do, but with anybody with a brain who is able to zoom out will see like, oh yeah, that's probably not the best thing to do. So how about we don't do that? And that's where we are.
Okay, we've mapped the fault lines. We've gone inside the head and heart of a LASO human. Now let's talk about the big unknowns, the research questions that even the smartest people on this can't answer cleanly yet.
Yes, let's put some of those on the table, because these are the questions you want to be asking out loud in any room where enhancement is being discussed. So, with these questions, we have to understand that there isn't one answer to them all. There are answers that are better than others for sure. But how we want to do it, okay, from my approach, right, with commissioning this whole thing, is to one, ensure that people are protected through a human-centric, evolutionary, and progressive model that protects the ethics of this whole thing. Because I believe if you build any project on a lack of ethics, you may get some immediate return as far as the understanding or some data points, but there is no longevity in an unethical project or model. And again, a lot of catastrophic projects in history have shown us that, where I believe that if somebody just kind of zoomed out and had a better approach, they would have realized how much we could have actually learned long term. Whereas maybe they got 5 or 10 really big data points, that 5 or 10 could have been 100 or 500 if they just took a little bit of better of approach. But I feel like maybe they probably would have been expedited because they're like, oh my God, the enemy's going to beat us. We got to get there first. And that completely screwed us over. So our goal in with all these questions and with this project in general is to obviously maintain point one. But point two is longevity in the American Human Enhancement Program. And to ensure that it's a repeatable, efficient, a predictable, and a sustainable system, and to ensure that it's something that helps and contributes to the progress of everything else. That's why it's really important observing a human-centric model at the center, so that everything else can get bigger, better, stronger, faster, and more efficient. So let's go ahead and start with question number 1.
Big question number 1, reversibility versus permanence. How reversible should enhancements be? Some things are easy to turn off or wean off. Others, deep implants, gene edits, structural changes to the brain, are not. Do we have a moral obligation to design enhancers with an exit ramp back to baseline? Or are we okay with creating permanent states the person can never fully leave? If you volunteer for LASO level experimental changes at 23, what if you want a different life at 43? Are we building in a way back or just saying you knew the risk?
So this is going to sound pretty dark, but there is no going back. And I think that's with everything. We can build guardrails as far as how we want this thing to go, right? We don't want to spill off into oncoming traffic. And we can say that we want to build exit ramps back to baseline as much as reasonably possible. But let's take the weight loss epidemic, for example. You know, we're fielding and commercializing hormonal technology, the GLP-1 and the Ozempics and all the different drugs out there. I mean, there's so many, I can't name them all right now, but people are taking those with a very finite lens. They're like, I want to lose weight. Something I've been struggling with. I just want this done, right? And they don't realize, okay, well, what happens when I stop taking this? Like, what's the return of normalcy on that? What's the lifestyle that I have to maintain when I'm taking this if it's causing such a rapid change in not only my fat mass, but my skeletal musculature? There's a select few groups, which I'm very proud of, that are doing that. And they're like, well, because of that, we know it has to be lifestyle based. And I'm like, well, that's awesome to hear. It's awesome to hear that somebody's actually thinking long term, you know, but if you're on that thing for, okay, let's do a radical time frame. Let's say 5 years. Okay, you're on this whole weight loss journey, even if it's GLP-1 or not. If you try to return to you 5 years ago, that's not necessarily a good thing. So we can't always assume that like an exit ramp back to baseline, as you said, or like a return to normalcy is actually what's best for the person. You know, for post-military life, for veterans or for retirees, that's called reintegration. How do you then, you know, remove yourself from the lifestyle that you've been indoctrinated into and then reintegrate into a society that doesn't have the same expectations? That doesn't mean you completely lower all your expectations or try to pretend like it didn't happen. That just means that you then take the skills that you've developed, the lifestyle that you've experienced, and translate that and merge the two. How can you use what you've learned to be a better part of the progressive society? You know, instead of saying, okay, well, I experienced these experimental changes for 20 years and now I want a different life. Well, you know, personally, I would be impressed. I would say, good. You should want a different life at 23 versus 43, whether you had an experimental changes, you were part of the LASO program or not. That's 2 decades. Okay, anybody who's the same at 43 or at 23, we should be concerned for that person. It's not really about, you know, I want to go back. It's about like, how can I take what I've learned and what I've experienced and build an even better, even more incredible life for where I am today?
Big question number 2, long-term psychological effects. We have some data on short-term performance gains from stimulants, mood modulators, and certain types of brain stimulation. We do not have rich data on how living decades as an augmented person affects depression risk, aggression, empathy, relationships, spiritual life. If we don't measure that, if we don't build longitudinal support, we are flying blind. So the question becomes, what monitoring, safeguards, and aftercare do we owe anyone we enhance? Not as a favor, as a duty.
Yeah, so really good points. I personally don't think that we need to reinvent the wheel. Like, if somebody is sitting there like, oh, this program, you know, we need to create this circular thing and it'll be able to improve our transportation and people will get better from point A to point B. Like, dude, that's already been done. Like, you don't need to do that. You can have better versions of it. And that's great. so we're not completely wasting resources on something that's been done. So how I see that is like the same platform that we have with our military service members. We have veterans and people that serve, and it's like, okay, well, what aftercare do we owe them? And it's based upon their service, right? A person who has 3 years of service as a cook or as an accountant won't have the same sort of aftercare as somebody who served 13 years in a combat specialty role. So I think at that point, that's not really a point that needs to be observed right now from a large lens. As we go along, we'll be able to develop agencies based upon the feedback that we get, whose primary role, like the VA, is responsible for post enhancement aftercare, post doctrine aftercare. And we have to remember that, it's not one instance that affects things like depression or aggression or like relationships. Again, every person is a collection of their own experiences and most importantly, not just the experience, but how they interpret the experience. So where one person might interpret combat as the worst time of their life, and they saw so much and it's something they can't get past, another person may see combat as, the best time of their life, where they had the greatest relationships and they built the most bonds. And it gives them a sense of identity because they have a different perspective, and they perceive it differently. So at this point, I don't believe we owe anything until we start establishing what the effort and input is going to be like. And that is going to be our duty. And as far as the data we have on short-term performance gains and all this stuff, that again gives us a really strong foundation, but it's not enough for us to move forward on. It's something that is progressive and that it is ongoing, and it's one of the reasons why we say you are your own scientist, your own researcher at the end of the day. So what you decide to do with that is really yours, but understand that no one can really interpret your experiences for you. So how you interpret them, enhancements or not, and how you then, apply a perspective is truly up to the individual. And if we don't outwardly express that, we're going to find ourselves going down tunnels that lead to nowhere.
Big question number 3, mental privacy and neural data. Neural data is not just another health metric. Your brain signals can reveal preferences, reactions, maybe eventually even rough outlines of what you're thinking. If your LASO suit or implant is streaming neural data, who owns that? How long is it stored? Can it be used against you in legal, employment, or intelligence contexts? Can you ever really delete it? Mental privacy is a frontier right now. Read only becomes read and write real fast if you don't draw boundaries.
Again, a great point, but I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel, right? It's the same sort of approach that we use for our technology today. It's like whenever you use an Apple product, you use an Android product, you use any sort of wearable device, they have a EULA, they have a terms of use, a terms of agreement, they have privacy policies, they have what they do with your data in XYZ, okay? And by using that product, you're like, okay, I agree to how my data could potentially be used. Some third parties sell it, some third parties protect it, some third parties use it for better analytics or better performance metrics, or even for marketing and advertising. But you as the individual say, you know what, I'm okay with that, or you have a choice over how it's being used. Now, for a program like this, there are certain ways that you would have to be used, right? If it's mission critical, we have to know that you're not you're not a subversive spy or something, or trying to leak secrets to another country's government. It's the same way that the big government does it now. When you sign up for certain programs, when you do certain things, you are basically saying, hey, I'm going to follow these rules. And if those rules you don't like, you don't have to sign up for it. And if you don't sign up for it, to each their own, someone else will. But if you decide to be in a part of a program where it's going to make you better or give you a better lifestyle, or you're going to get access to national assets or critical data or infrastructure, you have to realize those are rules that you have to abide by because it's bigger than just you. If not, if you're not willing to abide by them, then you aren't going to be a part of it. We think about our nuclear weapons program. We're not just going to let any person be a part of the nuclear weapons arsenal. Like, you're not going to know critical weapons makeup because we don't know if you're trustworthy or not. So if we know what your intentions are, if you're trustworthy, if you're willing to do the right thing, then you get a shot. But if not, then you don't. So again, I think that there will be agencies long term specifically dedicated for this sort of question and to determine what that will really look like. But really, again, it's up to the individual. If you decide like, hey, I don't want to be a part of this, then don't. I laugh because when we talk about this, I thought of the old South Park episode with Apple's terms, where Steve Jobs, they portrayed Steve Jobs and like people just sign stuff without looking at it. And we don't want this to be that. We want people to understand how important this is for you to know exactly what we're doing and where that goes. But again, that starts with the individual, and it starts and ends with the individual and the mission direction.
Big question number 4, asymmetric adoption and global morality. What happens when one nation, group, or corporation decides, we don't care about these ethical constraints? We're going full throttle. We're building whatever edge we can, no matter the cost. Do you respond by holding your ethical line and risking disadvantage? Matching their methods to survive? Finding some third way we haven't articulated yet? There is no easy answer. But pretending that adversaries will share your ethical scruples is a fast way to get surprised. LASO as a doctrine has to be honest about worst-case scenarios while still being anchored to something higher than fear, right?
Yeah, so that's the whole point of this. I mean, you have to really stop and realize that other countries don't play by the same rules that we do, which is why America has to play big brother in a lot of areas of the world. We can't control what other people are going to do, but we can deter and defend what matters most, and that's freedom. So uh, we hold the ethical line, but pursue advantage. Because if we don't hold the ethical line, then we are just part of the problem. We are the bad guys as well. And of course, there is a third way that we aren't going to articulate in this show because we don't know exactly whose ears are on it, and we don't want to risk that being leaked. But as far as matching their methods to survive, that's, in my opinion, is out of the question, because a lot of countries don't play by ethical rules. They don't play on a human-centric model. They play at the pursuit of being the best. In what they don't realize is good always prevails. And when they do that, they're only opening themselves up to more chaos, to more loss, simply for temporary pleasure and temporary prowess. But that does not work as far as the long run. So LASO, as a doctrine, as a white paper, as a developmental program, is honest about worst case scenarios. In fact, that's what we approach first, which is why this whole thing exists. We are very aware that the adversaries are going to try to be as expeditious as possible in the least ethical way possible. But that does not mean that we follow suit. We are anchored. We as an American people, we as a program, we as a pursuit are anchored to something much higher than fear. Okay, we are so far above that what they do couldn't even compare to the progress that we're going to make. But one thing I want to make very, very clear is that at the center of this thing must be an ethical, human-centric model. Is the only way this is really going to last. It is the only way that we will be ahead of this program, and it is the only way that we will ensure that people still have some sort of sustainable life in the future, and that progress and innovation are par for the course.
Big question number 5, who gets a say? Right now, a lot of decisions about human enhancement are made by senior officers, program managers, scientists and ethicists, politicians. Who's often missing? The rank and file warfighters, the families, the people whose bodies and minds are actually on the line. So a core question is, how do we give the enhanced a real voice in shaping the systems that enhance them?
Yeah, so I do believe if you build LASO doctrine without input from LASO humans, it's incomplete. Again, I want to present an idea from like a corporate perspective. You know, the average person doesn't have a direct say over how Apple develops its technology. They do use sales, metrics, and analytics and feedbacks to provide better products. But if people suddenly say, we don't like the camera, their Apple's not going to be like, well, let's get rid of the camera. It doesn't make sense. So you use the data you have to better your product or your program, and that comes from the direct user. So if we approach LASO the same way, if we approach this project that we're doing the same exact way, what it ends up looking like is having those advisory boards and developmental councils and things post implementation to be as a progressive improvement over time. And as long as we keep that positive relationship, where like, hey, if there's a problem, come to us with a potential solution, we'll evaluate it, and we'll see how we can, again, maintain the human-centric position in an ethical way, but also keep our eyes focused on protecting and perpetuating the mission. Right? It has to be like a marriage. It has to be a great relationship on both ends. If one person is doing more than the other, or if one person feels like their voice isn't heard, that relationship is doomed. So as we evolve this relationship, we have to ensure that we're getting the right voices in shaping the systems, and most importantly, continuing to improve on how we approach it and the potential outcome, because that is what benefits everyone.
Big question number 6, post-service and post-mission life. Last one, it's already hard enough supporting standard veterans. Now imagine a cohort whose bodies and brains have been deeply altered by cutting-edge tech. They might need specialized medical teams, maintenance and upgrades for implants, psychological support tuned to enhancement side effects, legal protection against discrimination. Are we building those systems in parallel with the tech? Or are we going to do what we've always done? Field the capability now, patch the human side later?
So difficulty, real or perceived, is about perspective. When we say it's already hard enough, I think we're doing a tremendous job at supporting our veterans. But what's most important is that they have to have the ability to support themselves. And as a veteran myself, I double down on that. Because regardless of what I've done for my country and what the country can provide for me, it's about what I do with those resources that really translates to support. If I don't ever reach out or tell someone how I'm feeling or talk about my experiences, no one can help me. No one knows about something unless it's identified. It's like in business, unless you tell someone about something, they don't know it exists. If you don't market something, it doesn't exist. If you don't talk about a feeling or your experiences, no one knows. No one's going to guess, man. The expectation of someone to do it for you is ridiculous. So even as we're developing, this cutting edge human tech integration, of course, we're going to need things like specialized teams, psychological support, legal protection, maintenance, all that stuff. There's no different than what we're doing now. But as long as we continue to build them in parallel, we're going to have success. We're going to see an upwards relationship between the two. So as I'm saying, like the reason why this is so important to me is because I've been on both sides. I've seen it pre-mission, and I've seen it post mission, and I've also been during the mission. And where that gives, as like a leader in this thing, some better perspectives is that you know what it feels like. You have more empathy. One of the biggest issues we had, even during my time in the Air Force, is that we had officers who were considered green under the gills, who the most difficult thing that they've ever done in their life was officer training school for a couple weeks. They went to college, party, did whatever, got a degree, and they got out. And now they're leading teams of combat veterans who have had like 10, 12, 13 years of experience over them, and that puts them at a significant disadvantage versus those officers who then served in the enlisted roles, then got their education, and then served in those roles, had a better understanding. And that's where we're at with this program. And we don't have to fly in blind. Like, we know what systems are in place, which ones work and which ones don't, and who we're going to need to rely on and organize with and shake hands with to make this thing functional for the long term, because we do care also about what happens after the mission. In fact, you can almost say that what happens pre-mission and post-mission are equals. And we don't want to just forward look into the montage, like you said, where everybody rides off with medals. What's really important is that, those medals you have to hang up. Those medals, you'll dust off the cobwebs. It'll be great to look at, but your life is what you'll have to experience. And that's what's important, to ensure that we're doing this in the ethical way, in the progressive way. Because at this point, that is what's really important to us. Hey, so real quick, I want to thank you guys for being with us throughout this entire thing. Again, this is part 4 of the LASO Doctrine. If you want access to part 2 and 3, you should subscribe to Endure Beyond Goal via the link in the show notes, so that you can get a full picture of what it is that we're doing, not only for America as a nation, but for the entire species to lead into a superior human enhancement program. So as we go along, again, I recognize that not everybody will be a part of this, but I want to leave you guys with something that I feel like is really important, that we've developed as a team, and that it will really help you on your journey to just do life better. Whatever that looks like for you. It could be to be a better father, better mother, to be a better lover, a better writer, a better artist, a better rapper, a better YouTuber, a better streamer. Maybe you want to start your own business. Maybe you want to be a LASO human. Just, your journey is yours to own. And here's what I wanted to leave you with, something that, we've found that some of the top performing people on earth do to help them be successful in their endeavors. And it's called your personal enhancement code. And that's where you build the part of the stack that you actually control, your ethical and identity stack. And I'm going to give you 3 concrete moves to make that possible. One thing I want you to remember is this is merely guidance. Okay. What you do with this is typically yours. There is no guaranteed anything. Life isn't guaranteed. And it's the one thing that we all experience. So understand you are your own researcher, your own scientist, your own creator. What you decide to do with this and what you get out of it is completely and entirely dependent upon you. All right. So your personal enhancement code, before anyone offers you anything, a drug, implant, protocol, assignment, you sit down with a pen and paper and write a 1-page personal enhancement code. And here's just a couple questions to answer. Now, you can add as many to this list or take some away, have 1, have 10, have 20. The choice is yours. Here's a couple of the prominent ones. Okay. And if you don't have a pen and paper, I would say now is the time to get one. If you're not in a place where you can stop and write it down, then now is the time. Okay, you could even go back and listen to this entire episode. I mean, I know we've been all over the place, but it's unscripted, and we try to put the foundation the best way we can. So just mark this point. You can always come back to it. That's a great part about hearing this thing. All right. So question number 1, what am I willing to risk for? Question number 2, God, family, country, legacy, humanity's expansion into space. Be honest. Question 3, what am I not willing to trade, no matter the mission? Number 4, core memories, capacity to love, my ability to worship, my free will. Question number 5. Under what conditions would I accept something permanent? Question number 6. Under what conditions is the answer always no? Now, if you wait to think about this later in the briefing room with rank and pressure and urgency in the air, you're already too late. The adversary has already won. Decide in peacetime who you want to be in wartime. For those of you that already understand it, we're already at war, and we have been. The war is nonstop. The point is to give you tools and resources so that you're ready to win one battle after another. Here's the second move, a checklist before you say yes. And this is a good rule of thumb for anything. In the military, we used to have a phrase called trust but verify. All right. So anytime something is on the table, you just ask these 6 questions. And this could be a personal thing. You don't have to ask it to the person who's giving you the potential return. Okay. What's the real benefit and for whom? Is this about my survivability, my team's, or someone's metrics? Question number 2, what are the known risks and what's unknown? If no one can answer that second part, that's a red flag. Okay? It's one of the reasons why we identify both the gaps and the overlaps. Number 3, how reversible is this? If it goes sideways, can we step it back or even course correct so that we can continue to make forward progress? Question number 4, who sees my data and how is it protected? Especially if anything is reading from your body or brain in real time, you want to know where that's going. Question number 5, what long-term support is built in? Medical, financial, psychological, not just, hey, good luck, warrior. That's one of the great things about being in the world we do now, even for our service members. You don't have to question that. We put things in place every single day to ensure that the return to home, to return to normalcy, is as much of a soft landing as it possibly can be. But again, it's up to you to not only ask that question, but to speak up, raise your hand, and realize and say that you need support. And question number 6, does this align with my personal code? If it doesn't, are you really willing to violate that? And what does that do to your sense of self? For us in this program, it's one of the reasons why we're not driven by fear like our adversaries. We're maintaining ethics. We're maintaining American personal codes. We're maintaining progress and innovation. We're maintaining mission success. It's really important to us that we maintain freedom for the people, which is why we're soliciting your involvement. I'm not saying that you have to be a part of it. I'm not even saying that you really have to care. But I'm saying that it's happening whether you agree with it or want to be a part of it or not. So if you care about the future and if you care about how things will look, if you care about a better life, then you would volunteer to be a part of it. Move number 3, you want to train identity, not just capability. So this is really, really important. We talked about this for about 30 episodes, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. You're not training to a specific metric. You're training to an identity, the identity of a person that can then replicate and accomplish those metrics at a moment's notice. And the truth is, we're all obsessed with capability, myself included. It's why we're doing this. We have the capability, we have the knowledge, we have the influence. Why not? Is the most prominent question on my mind. But if you don't give equal or greater attention to who you are becoming, you'll end up as a very advanced, very hollow person. So here's some simple practices that we found through the research to really counterbalance that. Keep people in your life who knew you before you were impressive. Okay, let them speak into your life. Schedule regular debriefs that are about you as a human, not just you as a performer. Maintain at least one part of your life that is deliberately inefficient and unoptimized. Could be art, service, family, rituals, faith practices. And pound this into your own head, okay? My worth is not the sum of my enhancements or my missions. Those are just expressions of my calling, not my identity, okay? And if you're raising kids, you can start this young, right? Because the world is going to convince them that their value is in metrics and upgrades. You can be the voice that says you are valuable before you ever pick up a tool. I mean, think about it. Just the opportunity to experience human consciousness, to exist when the odds were millions to 1, the probability not in your favor, yet here you are, right? To me, that says you're a winner from birth. Now, how do we maintain that trajectory of winning? And this, from cradle to grave is how you build LASO humans who can go to the edge of enhancement and come back whole. Guys, I want to say thanks for listening to this. All right. If you listen this far, here's what I know about you, even though I can't even see you. You care about capability. You care about your people. You care about the future of this species in this nation more than you care about comfort. And that's why the ethical and identity stack is your responsibility. LASO without ethics is just a science project with a body count. LASO with ethics is a path to guardians and explorers who can hold the line for God, family, country, and the generations that come after us, even as we step into orbit. You don't control what every adversary, every government, every company does with enhancement. But what you do control is the code you live by, the questions you ask, the lines you refuse to cross, the way you treat enhanced humans in your care. So here's your homework. Write your code, share it with someone you trust, and start asking these questions out loud in your circles. We have a duty, and we owe it to the upcoming generation. If you're a warfighter or first responder, this is part of your pre-combat check. If you're an engineer or a scientist, this is a part of your design spec. If you're a parent or mentor, this is part of the legacy you leave. We are going to see LASO class humans in our lifetime. You can guarantee that. Some of them will wear uniforms. Some of them will wear lab coats. Some of them will wear hoodies and run companies. Let's make sure that when the history books talk about this era, they don't just say we became more powerful. Let them say we became more principled. We didn't let tech write our ethics. We carried our ethics into tech. And as always, don't just survive this century. Train, think, and live in a way that your grandchildren's grandchildren feel. Refuse to break. Guard your soul as fiercely as you guard your body. Endure. Thanks for trusting me, guys. And until next time, much love to you and your families.
So as we close this out, I want you to hold two images at the same time. On one side, the fully kitted LASO operator or explorer, exosuit, AI co-pilot, implants orbital mission. On the other side, that same human, years later, holding their child, sitting in a quiet room, trying to make sense of their life. Everything we talked about tonight decides whether those two people feel like the same person or like strangers inhabiting the same body. And remember, whatever enhancements come, whatever orbit we climb to, whatever chaos this century throws at us, you are more than your metrics. You are more than your gear. You are more than what anyone can graft onto your nervous system. Thank you for listening to Endure Beyond, LASO Human Part 4. Train your capability. Forge your character. Protect your identity. And until next time, endure beyond. And remember, whatever enhancements come, whatever orbit we climb to, whatever chaos this century throws at us, you are more than your metrics. You are more than your gear. You are more than what anyone can graft onto your nervous system. Thank you for listening to Endure Beyond, LASO Human Part 4. Train your capability, forge your character, protect your identity, and until next time, endure beyond.